Well, it's time to do business. It will take us 55 minutes here on Business Incorporated to go around the world of business. Here's what we have prepared for you. In Zimbabwe, gold production is up 33%. And in Riyadh, as we speak, the 8th edition of the Future Investment Initiative is on. We'll get update from our correspondent. The United Nations Regional Tourism Congress is on. That's in Freetown, Sierra Leone. We'll also give you updates from there. Welcome to the program. I'm Ini John Mekwa. We start from the global space, telling you what's going on with gold. Gold is on a surge and it's still going. It doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. The U.S. elections is feeding on that. We see it hit an all-time high as investors flock towards that safe haven less than a week before the U.S. presidential election, while they await economic data for clues on the Federal Reserve. Spot gold, we see right there, is up at this time. It's gone up, again by 0.2% to $2,779.39 per ounce after hitting an all-time high of 782 earlier in the session. U.S. gold futures also went up 0.4% to 2,791.70. The November 5 election has entered its final stretch, with recent polls indicating a fiercely competitive race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Another contributor to gold's record rally is expectations of additional U.S. interest rate cuts. Lower rates reduce the opportunity cost of holding zero-yield bullion. In addition, Goldman Sachs is also looking into this, and they've lowered their gold forecast from $3,080 to $3,000 by December next year, 2025. But they maintain that there will be a bullish stance. It also anticipates 7% upside from Western exchange. Spot silver is down this time. It shed 0.3% to at this time, it shed 0.3% to $34.33, while palladium fell 1% to $1,210.72, while palladium was on the flip side. It gained 0.1% to $1,046.89 per ounce. Let's go to gold now. Oil, the global oil prices, they edged up on Tuesday after a sharp plunge that we see still on the part of stabilizing after that dip plunge that we saw on Monday. So we see that a surprise drop in U.S. crude is a contributor to these gasoline inventories following two previous sessions of losses on the prospect of hostilities easing in the Middle East. I'll keep our eyes on the number. We say 0.82% increase on Brent to $71.70 a barrel, while for WTI, 0.9% increase that we see to $67.86 per ounce. U.S. crude oil and fuel stocks fell last week. Market sources citing American Petroleum Institute figures. Crude stocks dipped by 573,000 barrels on the week ended October 25th. And then gasoline inventories also lost 282,000 barrels, while distillate stocks fell 1.46 million barrels. Of official U.S. data is expected later on today on that. Remember, on Monday, oil prices lost about 6% after that Israel's retaliatory strike on Iran over the weekend missed oil infrastructure. Well, we are still talking oil now. The refining sector in Nigeria's downstream is set to be expanding rapidly following the issuance of several licenses. Remember, yesterday we told you how NMDPRA has issued 9 more licenses, valid licenses to establish LTES, and 7 licenses to construct and 4 licenses to operate for modular refineries. Seems the modular refineries may not be so ignorable anymore. Well, rolling out These progress reports, among several, the authority chief executive of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Mr. Farouk Ahmed, says that it is committed the NMDPRA is committed to enhance the safety and compliance policy and for the use of operations as well as adoption of compressed natural gas in the midst of the licenses being issued.
Yeah, since 2007, the OTL Downstream Energy Week has brought together refiners, technology providers, marketers, regulators, and a broad spectrum of industry players in one room to advance the sector. 17 years on, the 18th edition has opened in Lagos. With the theme, Alliances for Growth, it soon became clear that the industry within the country and cross-border must collaborate for efficiency and growth.
This year's event takes place against the backdrop of two major industry milestones. First, the recent full deregulation of Nigeria's downstream sector, along with the shift to a market-based gasoline pricing system.
And here's what to expect over the next 4 days of engagement.
This year, we have lined up a total of 12 sessions. The themes are by no means exhaustive of the industry's multifaceted needs, but we hope they will contribute to the body of work that will aid informed action and policy formation.
What's a sector without the right fiscals that stimulate alignment? So from the energy desk of President Bola Tinubu, some key growth drivers are highlighted.
A stable regulatory environment and clear delineation of agency roles was a vital first point of reform, making the Nigerian business environment more transparent, efficient, and competitive.
Streaming from the PIA provisions and FG policy enablers, the industry regulator speaking to the gas revolution, licensed refining capacities, says it is also pushing the frontiers of alliances.
The NDPRA will also champion the development and adoption of a uniform gas transportation code within West Africa, within West and North Africa, considering the progression of the West African gas pipeline to Morocco for effective movement of natural gas within the regions.
Breaking into a quick panel session, some concerns are raised which details the essence of national and regional corporations.
We have excess capacity in quite a lot of things, and we have no capacity in certain things.
The Congress is officially open with tape cutting and tour of the large turnout of exhibitors.
Alliances cut across not just initiatives, but across collaborations on assets and asset management, and before you even start getting into mergers and acquisitions.
It's a week the organizers say will mark another watershed in the sector's history for good.
Well, now let's head to Freetown, Sierra Leone, where there is the United Nations Regional Congress. It's the Women Tourism Regional Congress going on there. And the aim of it is to get more women to play big in the tourism sector. Women have been playing, but it's been described as small players. So now it's to increase their participation in tourism in Africa.
The Ministry of Tourism and Cultural Affairs of the Government of Sierra Leone, in collaboration with the United Nations Tourism, is hosting Women in Tourism Regional Congress with the theme Beyond Empowerment to Education, Innovation and Finance Access. The three-day program opens officially with a keynote address by the Vice President of the country, Dr. Mohamed Jolde Jallo.
We identify tourism as one of those sectors for economic diversification because we believe that with tourism, you can bring enormous economic benefit, you'll have the opportunity to create jobs, and more importantly, you'll be able to unleash the potential of the hospitality industry, entertainment, and cultural heritage.
Breaking barriers and paving pathways to allow women transform the future of African tourism is the crux of the matter.
We are the largest workforce in the tourism industry and contribute significantly to its growth and development. Regrettably, most of us are predominantly concentrated in low-skilled and low-paid jobs. Women in Africa also continue to encounter significant gender disparities, from unequal pay to limited access to education and upward mobility, leading to filling leadership roles. We plan to change this narrative by calling on member states to stand up and overcome the challenges women are faced with.
All this, according to the United Nations, is part of a bigger and long-term plan.
If you look at our work, the tourism agenda for Africa, tourism for inclusive growth, we have 10 different core thematics that is anchored into this agenda. And empowering women and youth through tourism is one of them.
As the conference continues, recommendations and outcomes from workshops make the agenda, as well as proposed action points. Ini John Mekwa, Channels Television News.
Okay, so that's one of the events. The other event is going on in Saudi Arabia, and we have our correspondent Mayo Adegoke there to cover it. So who is covering it for us over there in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia? We did bring you that talk with that she had with Mr. Elumelu. That was yesterday. We saw that, but let's get update of what else has been happening in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And find out with Mayowa. Hi, Mayowa, how is it going there? What are conversations going on in Riyadh? We know you met up with the chairman of HAIR's group, but what else can you tell us about activities going on in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia?
Hello, and it's so good to see you. And a lot is going on. It's day 2 of the FII8, that's the Future Investment Initiative. And it's quite exciting to see so many global leaders and who people I like to call the global money bags gather together to discuss how to finance projects that would ultimately impact humanity. Day 1 was packed, so many sessions, plenary sessions. Of course, we had our very own Tony Elumelu, I beg your pardon, speak on a number of panels and stages. It was interesting to see him, of course, advocate Africa's power sector, advocate for the creation of jobs for Africa's young population. He talks about seeing potential, but also quite concerned about the rate of unemployment across board. So many conversations are going on even beyond just Africa. They're talking about AI, they're talking about healthcare. In fact, one of the interesting and trending topics has been the US election. Global leaders talking about what the economy of the world would look like if Kamala or Trump should win the office. Just today, they had a live poll conducted asking which candidate they think would be better for global economy. And it's interesting that Trump won that particular poll. So these are the sorts of conversations going on. You have leaders from some of the leading financial institutions from across the world. Yesterday, we had the CEO of TikTok talking about AI, talking about regulation, and so many other things. So it's been quite interesting to listen in on these conversations and see how global leaders are thinking and how they plan to use their office, their position, their influence, and their money to impact the world.
Yeah, interesting, Maya. Well, the thing about the US election, obviously, is we don't want to get caught up with that fever. Let's face ours. We know it will certainly affect us one way or the other. But I mean, talking about future investments in Africa, you spoke with Mr. Elumelu there, and he talked about the need to create more job opportunities. Technology does that. You did say that it's global money bags meeting there, but I wonder what you see when it comes to benefit to Africa, to Nigeria at the end of the day. After the talks, does it look like we're going to get anything that will better our stance and our status?
One thing I'll say from being here the past 2 days for different sessions is, number one, I'd like to see more African private sector players here. That's one thing I'll tell you. I've not seen enough African private sector players here, whether as speakers, whether as delegates, or whether as guests. Because if the global money bags are here, then this is where people should be to, lobby, to network, to see what projects are going on, see where they're thinking, where do they want to put money, and find a way to align it with what people in Africa are doing. So that's one thing that I would have liked to see more of. Another thing I've observed is how the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as again and again we emphasize, is interest in Africa. I see them championing emerging economies and saying, listen, how can we channel funds into emerging economies? What are the roadblocks? What can be done? So it's interesting to see KSA really advocate for Africa, restate and reemphasize their interest in Africa, how they're already doing a lot in Africa and they want to do more. Just this morning, I had an interview with one of the top leaders at the AG Fund. It's one of the funds here and they do a lot in Africa. And I asked him, I said, what are the roadblocks? If there are two things we know, it is one, investors are looking for returns, and two, Africa has got great potential. So it looks like that should be 1 + 1 = 2. So what is the problem? And he talked about how vision is lacking. So on the Africa side, they want to see more vision. They want to see governments be consistent in their policies, and they want to see that they're also following through on their own local plans. So before we bring you our money, we want to see what you are doing with your money. We want to see what you are doing with your policies. We want to see your MSME thrive so that we have more confidence to bring in money. So it's not a case of them not being convinced that Africa is where to put their money. It is, there's so much more beyond Africa is a place to put our money.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Maya. I hear you there. Policy inconsistency still a threat for the continent. But thank you so much, and do stay safe there. We'll be looking forward to more updates from you from here in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, let's head back home now. Yesterday, the State of the States report was released by Budget. And if you have been following Channels Television, you did see a bit of that conversation during our sister program, Morning Brief. Let's look at the other aspects now of it. Here in business, we dissect it even closer. So the report did show that in the 2023 fiscal year, combined revenue of all states in the country increased by 31.2%. It went from 6.6 trillion naira to 8.66 trillion naira. So you want to ask, where did it go to? What has it been used for? We saw that 32 states relied on FAC receipt for at least 55% of their total revenue, while 14 relied on FAC for at least 70% of that. Total expenditure across 36 states reached 9.78 trillion naira. That indicates a 21.19% increase from the previous year. Total expenditure went up. Aggregate operating expenses of state, even in the private sector, cost of sales is also going up. So aggregate operating expenses of state from 47.36, that showed an increase of 21.17%. And then total debt stock, obviously very interesting, of the state increased by over 38% from 7.25% in 2022 to 10.01%. And this was partially driven by an increase in domestic debts year on year. Now let's talk to the researchers and proponents of that report. We're now speaking with the country director, Mr. Gabriel Okelwo of Budget, joins us from our Abuja studio. Hi, Gabriel, good afternoon, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you very much, Ini. Good afternoon.
Yeah, well, we have to thank you for this report, shining the light on the state. Sometimes it does seem like there's so much attention on the federal, and we do not remember that the states also have a huge responsibility. So we have to appreciate that now. But on the whole, now tell us, what does this report, the State of the States, what does it tell us? We've seen expenditures increase, debt has increased, but also revenue has increased. I guess we can, in one way or the other, connect that to the removal of subsidy. I wonder if that's it, or looking at the timing. But just tell us a summary. What are some of those high points or highlights of your report?
Thank you very much, Ini. I mean, the State of States report is a flagship research project by Budget Foundation. And I mean, we've been doing this for over the last 9 years. The report that was released yesterday is the 9th edition of the State of State report. And this is just, the report gave us opportunity to bring the books of all the 36 states in Nigeria to public scrutiny, and Budget, as a civic society organization, takes that up as a responsibility. So the data that is presented in that report is not a data that is generated by Budget. They are data that were crawled from the audited financials, most of them from the Debt Management Office, from the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, that represents, the fiscal health of the 36 states. And there are about 5 indexes that we use in that research. The first is looking at the capacity of the states to, meet their operating obligation using only the internally generated revenue from the states. The second is to look at the effort of the states to improve internally generated revenue. The third is to look at the combined revenue of the states. When you put the capital receipts, you put the federal, the FAC allocation, you put the IGR, you put all of those, revenue sources together, and you put that side by side with the overall obligation or liability of the states, looking at how well is this overall, revenue able to meet the expenditure or the liability of the states. And, the fourth and the fifth, the fourth index looks at the debt sustainability. I mean, we know that in our climate, which is not peculiar to Nigeria, many governments rely on debt, both foreign loans and domestic loans, to be able to meet some of these, obligations that they have to meet. But at the same time, we then assess this debt sustainability of the state. How long will it take a state to be able to, pay up their debt? What is the burden that the debt is putting on the revenue capacity? And then the last one is to look at that component of the budget that is critical to the people, which is the capital expenditure. How well are the states prioritizing investment in capital expenditure? And by and large, I mean, overall, you will see that because the assessment, the 2024 State of State use the books or the revenue and the books of the state for the fiscal year 2023. When you put the fiscal year 2023 side by side with 2022, you will see that there were numbers of increases, right? The overall revenue of all the 36 states increased significantly from 6 trillion in 2022 to about 8.6 trillion in 2023. When you look at IGR, also, FAC distribution, that also grew, and that can account for the combined growth that we saw on the revenue side. But it's not just that. On the operating side, there was also growth in that. There were increase in the debt stock, there were increase, So when we put that all together, we'll see that. So for example, and one of the points you mentioned in your question is the impact of subsidy, right? Because sometimes, I mean, this administration came into power in May 2023, and PMS subsidy was suspended, and we saw that, in how much that was now available to be shared among the 3 tiers of government, and that accounts for this increase that we saw on the combined revenue side. So yes, we saw that increase. What's on the other side, we now have to put together with that is the impact of this increase on the people. And this year, we pick a sub-thing, looking at the health sector. How much is the state allocating to health sector? How much are they, were the actual releases or the actual expenditure, And when we looked at that, just looking at the health sector alone, we realized that combinedly, about 2.3 trillion was allocated to health sector from all the 36 states in Nigeria. But at the end of the fiscal year 2023, budget performance on the health sector alone was just about 1.39 trillion, which represents 58% budget performance. Now, health is critical to the masses. So the increase that we saw in revenue, of course, I mean, there are several things that state government can justify that they spread this, increase to. There are other sectors. There is education. There is, a lot of empowerment programs that the states have been doing as part of the economic shock subsidy. But looking at health in our research that we released this year, we saw that the budget performance to health sector was not encouraging. It's not encouraging. I mean, 58% budget performance to health sector is not encouraging. So this report is put out, and we like this platform for engagement. There are also backdoor engagement that is going to be going on, with the critical sector, with the critical stakeholders at the state, subnational level, for us to be able to see how this report can be used to drive fiscal reforms. Yeah, well, obviously, that's one of the reasons we're having this conversation. The other one is the reliance on FAC. We've always been talking about how states ought to increase their internally generated revenue with so much resources in different parts of the country. But we see from that report that the list of the states, they depend on FAC to at least 55%. We have the group that depends as much as 70%. So I wonder how you think we can use this to challenge perhaps the governors to look inwards more and rely less on FAC. Yes, I mean, I know when we talk about FAC, most of the time it's always like a sensitive conversation, because on other hand, some other, school of thought will tell you that this revenue initially generated from all these states. So saying that they are relying on it may not be the right narrative to use. But we also know that all the states in Nigeria don't bring the same thing to the purse, to the federal purse, right? And that is why we will continue to assess the dependence on FAC. A situation where about 32 out of 36 states in Nigeria, have more than 50% reliance on FAC allocation or cause for attention. Because and we can say that may not change, because there is a constitutional backing to that. But should there be, a situation where the revenue that accrue to federal purse is shocked, right? What then happens to the states that do not have capacity to generate enough enough revenue internally to be able to meet the obligation? And we have seen a sign of this during the COVID-19 situation, where a lot of our crude oil were not being sold, because the countries that will usually take our products were all on lockdown, right? And that is why we'll measure that. So it is a critical component. And even for the states that seems to be generating huge revenue for the federal government before it is shared back to them, we are also saying, can you also put efforts into improving internally generated revenue, right? So that should anything happens to this source, you have multiple sources. It is just like a case of a businessman. You just don't want to put all your sustainability and your livelihood on one source of income, because anything, a government policy, and action or inaction of any stakeholder can affect this one source of income, and then you can find yourself in a mess struggling to survive. And that is the justification for increased, advocacy on improving internally generated revenue. In the past, we have had, a research into the investment capacity, or the investment capacity that we have in all the 36 states in Nigeria. And it will interest you to know that all the 36 states in Nigeria, God has blessed us with one natural resource or the other. So what we are using this report to do is to nudge the state government to not just take the position of, every month there is a fund that is coming, whether we use our initiative or not, this federally, distributed revenue is coming. we are saying move away from that mentality and begin to look into how can you harness what, number one, what natural resources is available in your state, and how can you, harness these natural resources and connect it to the global market. The most of the economic issues we are facing in Nigeria today is because Nigeria as a nation, we are not playing big in the global market, right? And that makes us very susceptible to, exchange of fluctuation, and I mean, whatever we see in the exchange market, we have to face it because we don't have anything to compete in that market.
Yeah, unfortunately, and yes, we do have the potential, but I mean, it would be interesting if we could go to the debts and all of that and what they're actually doing with the increase in revenue they're getting from FAC, but time forbids us to do that. So I have to thank you so much, Country Director of Budget, Gabriel Okewo, for your time. And well, we expect more reports from Budget.
Thank you very much, Ini.
Now, it will be interesting that we turn to the private sector also and see not just the state, but the private sector on how to boost revenue and contribute even to the revenue of the state. But let's take a break. When we come back, that's our next conversation. To stay with us on Business Incorporated. Welcome back. Still watching Business Incorporated right here on Channels Television. I did say that we're going to look at the private sector now, looking at retail, boosting retail sales in the country. In the midst of all of this, yes, we do have attention on the federal, on the state, but let's also look at the private sector, and we're doing that now. Looking at the role of LCCI, that's the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We have the Chairman, Trade Promotion Board of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Prince Abimbola Olashere, joins us in the studio. Prince Olashere, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, a pleasure.
Great. So the private sector obviously does have roles to play. That's where LCCI comes in, also encourage and make it easy. But I know that if we talk about ease of doing business now, that's another kettle of fish. But we know that LCCI is planning a trade fair. And I'm just wondering, every year you have trade fairs and all of that, but what impact has it been having in the past year? What's the essence of it?
It's quite significant, and thank you very much. Like rightly said, we've been doing it for 37 years. We've done 37 years of it. Today, this year is our 30th edition. And clearly, when you look at a fair, you just don't look at it from the buying and selling. That is what people usually talk about. But the Lagos International Trade Fair is an ecosystem that brings together buyers and sellers, brings together regulatory authorities, MDAs, brings together foreign investors, brings together those who even just want to understand Nigeria. And this year's zone is quite significant, and I'll tell you why. The foreign participation is unprecedented. All of a sudden, we're getting inquiries from different countries as to we want to participate. What does that tell you? That tells you Nigeria is open for business. Therefore, they want to see what they can do in Nigeria. And the trade fair is a very unique platform for them to come and see what can happen. It's also a platform for the ordinary members of the public to interact with businesses. So again, within the trade fair, you have what they call special days. You have big companies that will now take a special day to now announce what we are doing. Some will use it to launch new products for the following year. And it's not by accident that the trade fair holds in November. Usually the first Friday in November for 10 days. So for this year, starting from the 1st of November up to the 10th of November. So what that means is also an opportunity for people to also say, for the year 2025, these are the products I want to launch. I now use the trade fair to do a kind of market sampling. How will people react to it?
Yeah, but how much of locally produced products and services are offered here? Because that would be the boost, not just about selling imported.
Certainly. As I said, even when you talk about imported, I said there are foreign entities that are coming to see what's going on. Ultimately, they know they'll have to produce here. But before you come and produce, what do? You have to come and test the market, come and see what will be the acceptability. And even though I talk about the foreign, we have significant local businesses that have turned up. I mean, we have the usual, the Dangotes, Eleganza, LifeMate, they are all there. But what's also unique, and you must also understand, the Nigerian economy is now integrated within Africa and the global world. For this year in particular, we have what they call the Africa Hall. We are not talking about the Continental Free Trade area. So we've created a hall called the Africa Hall where people can now come and see exactly what this entails. Now, under that Africa Hall, what do you think has happened? You've also seen other African countries that are coming to come and say, this is how we can compete. They also want to see access to Nigeria. Now, what that means again is for the Nigerian businesses, the SMEs, to also come there and interact with all those foreign delegations in your own country as well. How can we trade? So the theme of this year is about connecting business, it's about creating value, and we've now come up with various areas where people can see what is going on.
Yeah, but how much screening do you give participants? Because that means that these businesses will be like ambassadors to the country. You say a lot of foreigners are coming. These will be their first interaction, most likely. So the impression they get from here is what they take about Nigeria.
Remember that we do this every year. As we finish in November, we are starting planning for next year. And from January, we have what they call exhibitor parley. So we start telling them, this is what's going to happen. This is how you interact. This is what you get. And when you talk about training, it's not just for the chamber. The chamber is about a platform. You now have other parties that come up and offer the training. A big one that happened this year, I can tell you, is like the Federal Inland Revenue, who also who is using the platform of the LCCI, the trade fair, to also educate people as to what the taxes are like in Nigeria. Use that to also educate the foreign companies coming that this is what you can do, and this is how you can take advantage of the tax reliefs that are open here. So it's about competitiveness of businesses, and the trade fair does create that. I must also mention this, when we talk about the trade fair, don't focus just on buying and selling. We also have what they call the Children's Corner that we created. We started last year, we're expanding on it. It's being sponsored by Toleram. What are we doing? We are also bringing in colleges, secondary schools. We are bringing the younger one to now understand what commerce is all about, because we've seen the trend. Everything now in the future is going to be about skills, it's going to be about training, it's going to be about entrepreneurship. So we are using the trade fair also to start showing younger ones, especially secondary school. We have a lot of schools that are turning up to start learning about commerce, how exactly the structure of the economy, so they themselves, they can actually do something for themselves. So the trade fair, again, I must say this, you don't measure it in 1 year, it's over a trend. We've seen, and that's why I started by telling you, starting from COVID, we saw what happened last year, we're now seeing the trend. We have loads of people that are turning up. We sold off the fair, you can't get space anymore. What does that tell you? There is a lot of economic activity that is going on for which the fair is allowing people to come and showcase.
Well, I know that a lot of people want to know, well, goods be cheaper there. But that's not for this conversation.
It's always cheaper.
All right, we have to thank you so much for having Bola Olashere, Chairman, Trade Promotion Board with LCCI, and wish you the best in your outing.
Thank you very much.
All right, now let's head to London, where Juliana is standing by. We started talking about the budget speech yesterday, and Juliana did promise that by this time we would have already had it, so I guess we could have the details of it. There are more taxes expected. Juliana, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Annie. Unfortunately, no, we don't have all of the details of the budget because Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has literally just stepped up to the dispatch box. So I've been having a sneaky look at the updates on my phone because, as has been announced and has been briefed, this is the most important budget in British history, I would say, for at least the past 30 years. I think the Labour Party are really kind of billing this as like what happened or should I say post-World War I, when it was down to the Labour Party to rebuild Britain. And just listening to what Rachel Reeves has said in her opening remarks, that's literally how the Labour Party are spinning this as an opportunity, their first opportunity in 14 years, to trickle down some of the wealth that has been locked in certain areas. So like I said, Innie, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, the first female Chancellor in history to deliver a budget, has just started speaking. But of course, as to be expected, we know that the press here in the UK is the fourth pillar of society. So lots of information has already been passed on to the press, which began on Monday, of course, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, spelling out to the general public that it is going to be pretty difficult over the next couple of months and years, that the Conservative Party, led by, goodness me, there are many Conservative prime ministers, but certainly since the pandemic, it has been incredibly difficult. Rachel Reeves pointing towards the bitter divorce from the European Union with Brexit and the mess that's been made there, especially for small to medium-sized businesses who trade with Europe. Also mentions as well of Liz Truss and the mini budget, which of course spooked markets, left mortgage holders struggling to pay their mortgages because, of course, all those mortgage products, the interest rates and mortgage rates went up. And again, referring back to that £22 billion black hole. So we know that we believe there are going to be tax rises, particularly a freeze in the income threshold for paying tax, which basically means over time, as inflation goes up, more people who wouldn't typically pay tax will now be paying tax. Those who may be watching who have children in private school in the UK, that's been quite a big one. That VAT on private schools is now going to be added. So you'll be paying 20% more to get your children studying in the UK in private schools. Not popular. That will begin at the end of next year. And there are other bits and pieces like freezes, or there's been an uplift to how much you'll be paying minimum on your bus fare, and several more. You will be hearing about this throughout the day, Innie. But like I said, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, just stepped up a historic budget delivery in the UK today, with a major focus being on investment in the NHS. I believe like £3.5 billion has been set aside for that. And it's investment. That's what Rachel Reeves and this Labour Party want to do. They want to rebuild Britain. So once again, this is seen after 100 days in office as to be the most important budget for at least 30 years in this country. We will have more, of course. I'll be speaking about that with my colleague Simon Pusey on Channels Business Global. But as soon as we have more, you'll hear from it. If not from us, I'm sure you'll see it on X, Innie.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be everywhere, Juliana. But let's take a quick into the investor's mind and see the activities this afternoon.
Yeah, it's it's obviously these are not live numbers, so really important to point them out because, of course, we know the pound is going to move significantly as soon as Rachel Reeves starts talking about those tax rises. But from the last check, the all-share index, that was down 0.32%, FTSE 100, the blue chip, down 0.22%, and the FTSE 250, the domestic market, up slightly with optimistic caution up by 0.01%. In the currencies market, the British pound is currently trading down against the US dollar by 0.28%, down 2 against the euro by 0.41%, and down against the Japanese yen too by 0.54% in A.
All right, Juliana, thank you so much for that. So we will now, well, thank you, Juliana. We'll get more from the budget speech, obviously, in the coming days. Now, let's just follow through with that and do the other markets. At this time, I wonder if I could have the market on the board, but we can tell you for the United States that the S&P features went up on Wednesday, boosted by that strong results from results have been released since yesterday. We've seen additional ones today. Alphabet has released, and features tied to the broad market index added 0.2%. That's for the Nasdaq features. Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 0.04%. Okay, it's gone down 0.03%. S&P in the green, Nasdaq. So good results are being released, feeding into the market sentiment. Right, I think Juliana does have a little bit of backtrack of how the market traded closed yesterday, Tuesday.
The U.S. stock market was mixed on Tuesday as the Dow Jones was down at 0.4% down, the S&P 500 up at 0.2% up, and the heavy tech Nasdaq up at 0.8%. Companies like Alphabet led this large increase in the Nasdaq as it had a record-setting high of a closing on Tuesday. It is clear that many investors are also watching to see what the job reports will come out to be. Additionally, they are also looking at the November 7th interest rate announcement. It is clear that we might not see interest rate cuts anytime in the near future, but many are hopeful and watching to see how the Federal Reserve will respond over the next days and weeks ahead in preparation for the November 7th announcement.
That was Maria, not Juliana. Maria Bird, our correspondent in Washington. Looking at other markets now for Asia, we could see Asia at this time. The Pacific market was mostly down on Wednesday. Nikkei escaped that. Climbed up to 39 from 38 that we had yesterday, 39,277.39. Kospi in the red, almost 1%. Hang Seng Index also in the red, more than 1.5%. We see other markets on that part is the Shanghai and as well as Nifty. So it's mostly red that we see. And traders are assessing consumer price data out of Australia with headline inflation for September quarter rising 2.8% year on year. So that's the sentiment that drove into the market. Now let's head back to Africa and see how NGX is doing at this time. It continues the red that it closed with yesterday. Now we've lost the 98,000, say it at 97,994.88, down 0.06%. Johannesburg follows suit, lost 0.45%. Looking at other parts there, Egypt, if we could have that in the red also, while Nairobi Stock Exchange closed very positive yesterday, Tuesday, at 2.43%. In the green. Now let's go to, I guess we may just look at some other African news or stories at this time. That good news coming from Zimbabwe, where their gold production surged 33% in the third quarter of 2024, with output rising to 10.3 tons compared to 7.7 tons in the previous quarter. And this is according to official data from that country. The first 9 months of the year, cumulative gold production increased at 7.2%, reaching 24.1 tons, up from 22.4 tons. And closely related to that, in Niger, well, not the democratic government there, but the military administration in that country, they've signed an agreement with Starlink SpaceX satellite internet venture. They've signed a pact for internet services in that country, according to an official statement and post by the Communication and Digital Economy Minister, Sidi Mohammed Raliu. The minister notes that the agreement, which was signed on Tuesday in the capital, aims to extend high-speed internet access to the entire nation while strengthening the country's digital security. And just before Ladi comes up, right there. Well, I think that's the much I can take, unfortunately, for Ladi. So, Ladi, I think Niger they're increasing their internet speed.
Right.
And it does look like Starlink is taking over Africa, and they're increasing their reach. More as agreements being signed and all of that with Starlink. Well,
it was just a pity they can't raise tariffs in Nigeria at this point, even though it's good.
Oh, I know you're
for the
happy they
consumers.
retracted that,
Yes.
Ladi. Well, but don't forget that apart from Starlink, stakeholders and players, operators in the communication, in the telecom, have been complaining that there's a need. Yes, so there's a need, and we've seen increase in government petrol. We've seen increase in, electricity. We've seen.
Shout out to the Band A.
You know what I'm saying. So if they are operating. It's not that it's going to pay me.
Right.
I don't earn from there.
I'm fighting for the consumers at this point. How much more can we take?
I'm fighting for the industry to stay alive and thrive.
It's a very important
We
industry.
need that. Employment would also be affected. Don't forget. Their revenue is affected. Investors' money is also there. So, let's look at the full picture.
Let me not be selfish.
And not just one aspect of it. All right, Ladi.
All right, now let's get a check on what's playing out in the crypto space there. We see DYDX, they've laid off about 35% of their core staff. Then we see trending meme coin, that Shiba Inu has moved 2 steps up in the crypto market, flipping Avalanche and Chainlink to occupy the 12th position on the chart. That's talking about the headlines in the crypto market at this time. We're seeing Bitcoin there trying to break past the all-time high. All right, other stories we see. Africa crypto, as adoption has surged, hits in about 189%. Africa's cryptocurrency adoption, we see it surging, and the Telegram-based crypto communities are growing really strong. And that's according to data from BitGet. That's a cryptocurrency exchange. So those are the top headlines there in the crypto space. All right, let's talk to Adebayo Jonas, the co-founder, ICP.hub, Sahara, joining me via Zoom. Great to have you, Adebayo.
Great to be here once again. Thank you for having me, Ladi.
All right, so we've seen that report there showing a surge in cryptocurrency adoption in Africa by about 189%, particularly with Telegram communities. Why is Telegram getting so popular, when it comes to the crypto communities?
It's more or less of complementary activities. Telegram has been quite popular in the country, in the continent, as a means of peer-to-peer communication. And of course, it's well secured. And when we are looking at avenues that people can easily use to transact cryptocurrency, it's becoming one of the top, places people can actually turn to. And of course, looking at the recent clampdown on exchanges from the government, so of course, people need to figure out a way to continue to transact, to continue to buy and sell cryptocurrency, because it's actually an edge against inflation among some other things. So Telegram is the top choice at the moment. And of course, with millions of users globally, think of no other place to go.
So I guess there's no risk, with using, these Telegram apps to actually store crypto and, because you're technically making Telegram a bank at this point.
Yeah, there is always going to be a risk attached to everything. Even using our mobile devices, our mobile applications for banks, there is always going to be potential security breach. But provided people know precisely how to protect themselves, how to make sure that their login and every single thing about their security is being done properly, then they will be able to protect themselves. But for those who are sort of ignorant towards this, they stand a chance of getting breached, of losing their crypto assets and so on. So the world will always remain the same, but people need to learn how to protect themselves even better.
Right, and talk to me about the demographic composition now of Africa-focused Telegram groups. Is it influencing the growth and activity more?
Yes, absolutely, it is. Because right now there are a lot of canvassing for people to look into crypto as a means of edging against inflation, to make their daily means obtained. And a lot of all this conversation always going on within the lower ages, university ages, and so on. Because Africa is said to be the youngest continent, and of course, because we have a lot youths, around, both between the age of 18 to 24 and so on. So, and this particular age are the most vibrant age. They are always looking forward to the next big thing, always wanting to get rich easily. And of course, this is the age that people are usually attributed to trading crypto. So this particular demographic is sort of on the brighter side, on the positive side when it comes to crypto adoption in Africa, because this is the age that you see a lot of people trading, a lot of people buying and selling crypto. So, and that is where Africa is the most strongest.
Right, Africa there, leading in the pack. Thank you so much. Always great having your perspective. Adebayo, co-founder, ICP.hub Sahara. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Ladi, for having me.
All right, there you have it. We're seeing Bitcoin there trying to get back to the previous all-time high and maybe surpass it. But who knows if that's going to play out. We'll definitely keep watching.
Elections is just how many days down?
Right.
The U.S. election. I'm sure that's feeding into it. Exactly. It is. But we'll be counting down and following up on that. Ladi.
And that's the U.S. election.
Yes, the U.S. election, of course. Well, that's it on the program. Thank you so much for being a part of Business Incorporated today. It's not over for the week yet. We still have another episode tomorrow. But remember, you can always watch this episode and previous episodes on our YouTube channel. It's right there waiting for you. Business Morning, Business Incorporated. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.